the first video, I gave you a brief overview and showed you how to basically take the unit apart. You can see that video if you click up here. And then in the previous video, I basically focused on the cassette mechanism and repaired that cassette mechanism, which you can also see if you click on part 2, which you can also see up here. So I thought, well, whilst I still have this cassette mechanism out, I'll use this opportunity to show you how to do the line-in modification for this particular unit. So let's first look at the wiring and how that will work, and then afterwards we'll physically go and put it in. Right, well, before we do that, 2 important points. Number 1 is the way in which this line-in modification works. It works in lieu of the cassette mechanism. So it's a way of, if you don't have any tapes and you'd like to still use your phone or your iPod in order to get audio into this particular radio, then you can disable the cassette mechanism and then do this line-in instead. However, I will show you done in such a way that this is completely reversible and does not modify any of the original parts of the radio. In other words, the line-in can be removed, the cassette mech can be plugged in again, and this whole unit will be completely original. So just 2 important points before we get into that. So here is the main circuit board of the cassette mechanism, which we're going to basically emulate with the line-in modification instead of the cassette mechanism. So we'll unplug this. And on the right, we've got those 3 pin headers, 1401, 1402, and 1403. So let's take a look here what some of these pins are for. So you can see what all these inputs and outputs are. But there's specific pins that we're interested in order to do this. The most important one is this pin 6, cassette enable, which you can see this is a high pin, and when you ground this pin, we basically tell the radio to switch off the FM tuner and revert across to cassette for audio input. In addition to that, we have this cassette mute. By default, when it does that, the cassette is muted until the cassette player is ready to tell the radio to unmute that signal. The reason there is that because, of course, when you insert a tape, it starts standing still and has to kind of speed up and get ready to play, which can take a fraction of a second. Once that's done, it basically sends an 8.5 volt signal to this pin 3 over here to tell the unit unmute, and it's ready for the cassette to play. And then lastly, once that's done, of course, the signal itself comes from these 3 pins, so common ground for audio and then left and right signal. So how can we make use of that? Well, we'll do a couple of things. So you'll see I've just dimmed out or grayed out all the rest and just keep some of these relevant pins that we need. The first thing we'll do is that we will wire the CPS button on the front face to this cassette enable. So we have a mechanical switch on the face of the unit to basically flip between line-in and radio with this toggle switch, which will be very useful because this button is also basically connected to ground on the faceplate. Second thing we'll do is we have to go and unmute the cassette. So there's an 8.5 volt coming in on pin 9, which you can just send back to pin 3 on header 1401 to permanently unmute. Now that should be fine because your media player or your iPad or your whatever doesn't make any other noises except for the audio. So that shouldn't cause any background sound. So that should be no problem whatsoever. And then lastly, the signal itself will wire in through the audio in jack into these 3 pins over here for the actual audio signal that we're going to send into the line out. Right, so that looks great. Let's go back to the radio itself. Right, well, I've just shown you what wires we're going to be using, but of course the whole time I used this board for the cassette deck to show you what the various pinouts are. But in reality, we're not plugging anything into this board. I mean, we are using the line-in as a replacement for the cassette mechanism. So looking back at the radio itself, what's really important is these exact corresponding pins over here on these headers. So basically, in order to cassette unmute, we're going to have to jump a pin 3 over here as well to the 8.5 volt. We're going to jump at pins 2 and 6 to make the CPS button, do the cassette enable, and then lastly, audio is into here. If I send audio into these 3 pins from the line in, that's going to be sent into the amplifier in order to be able to use those. So everything is happening around these 3 pins over here. Then how will we physically get this thing in here? Well, what's interesting on the back of this unit, and it's a little hard to see, let me just unplug some of these wires so that you can see what's going on. Quickly unplug this as well and turn this unit around. So looking at the back, you can see that they use the same chassis for a number of models. And some of them actually have the built-in 5-pin DIN jack so that this thing can go to a power amplifier, and that would normally sit over here. But the Monterey doesn't have that. That means we do have a nice space over here. So we have this little plastic plug which is removable, you can see, and here we have quite a nice space to be able to mount our 3.5mm audio jack, which you're going to panel mount and have sitting right over here for the line in signal to be sent in. Now of course I don't want to modify this original piece because I want to make this fully reversible, so this piece needs to be able to be reinstalled back here. So I'm just going to use a scrap of plastic which I have right here, which is approximately the same width, and I'm going to go and cut out, there we go, I'm going to just mask this up and then go and cut a piece that's exactly the same shape and size as this that I can drill a hole into to mount in here. So if you don't care about that, you can just simply drill a hole into this original piece, but I really want to show this to you in a reversible way. All right, let me get the saw ready and let's go and take some measurements and start cutting. Right, so here's the piece that I'm going to use. It's nice and thick on this side. It seems to be tapered on this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mask this off a little bit with blue tape, because then I can very easily trace the part that I'm trying to clone. There we go. By just placing that on here and then just tracing around the outside, and then if I cut away all the lines, then I should have a perfectly good piece. So I'll put that there. And there we go. So we only need the one piece, but I just went and thought I might as well just go and measure two while I'm at it, just in case something goes wrong, then I have the next piece ready to go. Bit of a reverse angle, but yeah, let's go and do some cutting over here with my hacksaw. So here's some rough cuts, and now I'll just use the Dremel to cut those corners nice and clean, and that should look better. Alright, let's do some dremeling. Okay. Time for a quick test fit. This fits in over here. It fits in great. It's just a little bit too tall still. Interesting, but wow, it's an unbelievably tight fit. Okay, a little bit too tall. And see if I can trim it with the Dremel some more. The Dremel is more melting off the plastic than what it is cutting it off. And there we go. Make short work of trimming this piece a bit. Another test fit. Perfect. That's going to work absolutely great. Right. So now it's time to get this 3.5mm jack or 1/8" depending on where you're from, and I'm going to try and put that right there in the middle, right there. And then of course we don't want these cables to hang in the way, so I might have to mount it sideways. And then we're actually going to run the cables through the unit to the other side to eventually get here to these connectors. So either this way or that way. Good, let's get a center punch and mark a spot. Sure, I can't believe how tight this thing sits in here. It's brilliant. So pliers to get it out. Can you believe it? Alright, now time to drill the hole. So let's see what size hole we need. Let's do a quick measurement, take this nut off. About 6mm, or it seems over here that, yep, it's about 1/4 inch is going to give me a tiny bit of play. I want to give this thing nice and tight, so 1/4 inch is going to be good. Absolutely perfect. So I'll drill the smaller pilot hole first and then follow up with a 1/4 inch. Let me go and get the drill. Right, I'm going to start with the 1/8" pilot hole and then drill that larger to 1/4 inch. Let's do that now. There's the first hole. To make sure there's no play, I might actually go 15/64. So basically I'm going to be a 64th under. And then I can always just give it a slight wiggle just so that there's no play. The 1/4 inch was just a hair too big. So let's go a little bit smaller. It's difficult to hold. Maybe I'll just do this in my vise off camera. Right, I worked my way all the way up to 15/64, sorry, just under a 1/4 inch, and now I can give this a test fit. Yeah, it seems to be fitting pretty good. So let's go and put that in. A little bit to one side, but that's okay. And let's see how this fits in the unit itself. Wow, that's actually a great fit. So it's sitting over there. So I haven't pushed in all the way because it's very tight. But those I'll bend in slightly once the cables are attached. This one too. And then we'll run the cables down and run to the other side. Now that's looking really good. Remove that again. It's quite a tight fit. And now we can go and do some cabling. Right, so I'm going to test the pinouts of this jack so I can know which is tip, which is ring, and which is sleeve. So I'm just going to use a standard 3.5 to 3.5mm connector, which is very easy to plug in. And then we can do some testing. So I'll do that here. And this is on C continuity, so it's very easy to test. So let's first find the tip. Oops, slipped over there. Okay, that one's clearly tip. Let's find the ring. Not that one, good. Should be this one, it isn't. It seems to be this one. Let's find sleeve. Not tip, not ring. Sleeve as well. Well, that's not right. So one of these must be this pin. That isn't. Okay, if you look closely inside, here's where this thing takes a bit of a turn, because in actuality, this is not, even though this was sold to me on eBay as a stereo jack, this is actually a switched mono jack. So you can see here that this pin is actually touching this pin when there's nothing inserted. So you'll probably find now that this is going to be a short between these two pins. Yep. When I insert this, it's going to open that, and there'll just no longer be a short between these two pins. Yep, nothing at all. So this is used in a case where you have a mono jack, but you want the ability to have an internal speaker perhaps running, and then the moment you insert the jack, that breaks the circuit to the internal speaker, so it just uses this circuit over here. This is not a stereo jack. So unfortunately, time to order the correct part on eBay and wait a lot of time for this to come from China. Alrighty, well, while we wait for the correct jack to be shipped via eBay, I thought, let me turn my attention to some of the wiring. So what I thought to make life easy is I'm just going to use some of these same jumper wires that you've seen over here, which already have a male and a female. So the male end is perfectly good. I'm going to use these three over here for audio. So we'll use the black for audio ground, and then we'll use the red and the white for the right and left respectively. So we're going to have these three. And then I'm just going to use this other jumper, which I'm going to cut and then crimp on some more pins just to make some more of these very nice jumper wires, which should work great for the other pins. So now let's get to it. And there we go, and there's our first jumper. Definitely a little bit fiddly. I'm actually not going to use these cables after all. I'm going to use this slightly thinner cable right here. And yeah, let me carry on and make the other one and take it from there. Before I do that, I'm going to install the first jumper to take a look. So this is the one that's going to go from pin 2 over here through to pin 6 over there to wire in the CPS button. Oh, and that's looking great. You can see that well on camera. So there's the first jumper installed. 2 and 6, so basically taking the CPS button through to the cassette enable. Right, let me do the other jumper. And there's the next one, and this is going to go basically from pin 3 over here around to pin 8 over there, so he's about this length. Should be just fine. And there's the second jumper. So let me install that now. Let's do that a little bit off camera. And there that is done. Just to cross-reference one more time, so that you can see CPS is coming in on pin number 2, which we're looping through to pin number 6, which is basically to tell the unit there's a tape involved. And then from pin 9 we've taken this 8.5 volt all the way to pin number 3 here on 1401, which basically is the cassette unmute. Right, so we can already give that an early test. I'm going to plug the radio in to power, and let's put in some speakers as well. I'll put that over there. And what we should be able to do now is use this CPS function on the front to toggle between radio and FM. So let's give that a try. Here we go, turn on the radio. So there we hear the hiss of the FM. I'm going to hit the CPS. Yep, and it's quiet. Hit the CPS again, and there we hear the hiss. So that's great. So that's toggling between. So this is working perfectly, grounding and ungrounding that pin. Right, the next thing to do is to work on the audio cables for this input here. Alrighty, now I'll focus on the audio cables. So I'm going to use these 3, black for ground, white for left, red for right, and let's go and crimp them. Right, those are done. So now we can see over here that we have ground and right are a bit closer together, then there's a gap, and then there's left. So what I think I might do is I'll use the single pin for left, and I'll use a dual pin header for ground and right. Okay, now we can plug those onto the board as well. And there we go. So I've got the loops. So this loop over here. And we can just tuck this down. You see over here, because in the future the cassette mechanism will still be installed here, but there's that left loop, and you can see the pins quite clearly. And here's the right one over here, ground, right, left. Which is exactly as per this over here, ground, right, left. And what we're going to do is we're going to feed these 3. You can probably twist them around each other a bit. And then feed them through to the other side. So the easiest way to go here is actually to go through over there. Okay, I'm going to feed them neatly here. So when these are installed, this will probably be, because keep in mind that for this installation you probably still want the cassette mechanism to physically be here in this unit. It's just not going to be doing anything. So they kind of have to be to one side. So these need to go around this bend. Let's take them one at a time. And there we go. Cables have tucked all the way around here. Here they come out the back. The only thing left to do now is wait for our 3.5mm or 8-inch jack from eBay and wire it up to finish this installation. But effectively, if I flip this back over again, you can see this aux in mod is done. You can reinstall the cassette deck here. It will just not do anything functionally. But yeah, this is all wired and good to go and out of the way. So now through the magic of video editing, let's wait for time to pass and for those jacks to arrive. Alrighty, so I managed to source these jacks off eBay, which you can see is a much nicer, round, small jack, which is going to be perfect for the back of this radio. So I have this piece over here. This jack fits in over here. Much better solution, and then that will fit in here at the back of the radio. Let's have a quick look at that. Yeah, that should be fine. I just need to bend that ground jack a little bit up, and then that should be a pretty good fit. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these 3 audio cables and let me solder them in. So I've soldered it into place on the 3 pins, and I've also put just a little bit of heat shrink to make sure that it doesn't short out against anything. And now I'm going to go and assemble everything. There we go, that looks pretty neat and tidy. And I use a simple 3.5 to 3.5mm jack, plug that in here, and then I'm going to source some content from something like my laptop or my phone. So let's flip that over and give that a try. So I'm going to wire everything up. Alrighty, everything is wired up and ready to go. Let's turn it on. And here we hear that we have some hiss from the radio. No station is tuned in right now. Now I'm going to hit the CPS button, which is now going to flip to line in. And there we can see we have some audio coming in via this line in jack at the back. Working great. Hit CPS, back to radio. Let's go tune in the station. Turn that down, so there we go. Audio coming in from the radio. Back to CPS, audio coming in from the external jack. So that's the line input working fantastically on this particular unit right now, and yeah, I'm pretty impressed. Thank you very much.